You know, when most of us look at these huge, complex financial systems, we see something impenetrable, like a fortress. But every now and then, someone comes along who sees it differently. They don't see a fortress, they see a puzzle, a machine with hidden levers and secret back doors. Today, we're talking about three men who didn't just play the game, they found a way to break it wide open. And this right here, this is the big question we're going to be wrestling with. When somebody finds a loophole and pulls millions out of it, what do we call them? Are they a genius, just playing on a level we can't see? A high-stakes gambler who bet it all and won? Or are they just a swindler in a nicer suit?
So here's our game plan. First, we'll meet our three system breakers. Then we're going to look at the exact flaw each one spotted. After that, we'll walk through their absolutely wild plans, see what happened when everything came crashing down, and then we'll come right back to that central question.
All right, time to meet our main players. First, we've got Ivar Kruger, the guy they called the Match King. Then you have the Hunt brothers, these insanely powerful silver barons. And finally, Barney Curley, a man people called the Racing Robin Hood. Three totally different guys from three totally different worlds.
I mean, just stop and think about the sheer nerve of these plans for a second. One guy used something you find in every kitchen, a matchstick, to basically control the economies of entire countries. Two brothers looked at a global commodity and said, yeah, we're not going to invest in that. We're going to buy all of it. And a gambler figured out how to beat a whole industry with nothing more than a horse and a single telephone. It's just wild. So here's the thing. None of these epic plans could even exist without one crucial ingredient: a weakness, a crack in the foundation of the system. Before you get the grand scheme, you have to find that tiny little flaw that makes it all possible. Let's see what our guys found. For Ivar Kruger, the flaw wasn't in a computer or a stock ticker. It was pure human emotion on a massive scale. See, after World War I, Europe was just shattered. Countries were literally broke, and they were desperate for cash to rebuild. And Kruger saw that their desperation was so deep, they'd trade just about anything to get that money.
Okay, now for the Hunt brothers. Their opening was something else entirely. It was a market that was basically the Wild West. Back in the 1970s, the silver market had very loose rules, and this is the key part, it was super easy to get credit. It was the perfect storm for anyone with really, really deep pockets to start buying up tons of the stuff without anyone really noticing at first.
And then we have Barney Curley's flaw. And this one is just, it's so beautifully simple. His target? A sleepy, small-town racetrack in Ireland. And what was its big, fatal weakness? It had one single public telephone. That was it. That was the only line of communication between the guys taking bets at the track and all the other bookies scattered across the country. A single vulnerable point of failure.
So they found the cracks. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the plans themselves. Because spotting the weakness is one thing, but actually building a plan to exploit it, that's where things get really interesting.
Kruger's plan was unbelievably slick. He basically became his own one-man IMF. He'd go to a country like Germany and say, hey, I'll give you a massive loan, say $125 million. All you have to do in return is pass a law making my company the only one legally allowed to sell matches in your country. But the real trick was in his books. He was a master of creative and completely fraudulent accounting. He used shell companies to hide a debt and created these special B shares for investors that had almost no voting rights. Think about that. He could take people's money to fund his empire, but they had zero say in how he ran it. Genius, right?
The Hunt's plan wasn't elegant. It was a full-on brute force assault. They wanted to corner the market. And that concert ticket analogy is perfect. If you buy every single ticket, you're the one who decides the price. Their goal was to own so much of the world's silver that industries, jewelers, anyone who needed it, had to go through them. They literally wanted to become the silver market.
And just try to wrap your head around the scale of what they were doing. 100 million ounces. We're talking more than 3,000 tons of silver. They weren't just dabbling. They were trying to suck the entire planet's supply into their own vaults. And it worked, for a while. The price shot up from around $6 an ounce to almost 50.
Now, Barney Curley's plan, oh, this was pure art. It was less of a financial scheme and more of a Hollywood heist. First, the setup. He gets this horse, Yellow Sam, and for months he makes sure it runs terribly in public, building up these amazing 20-to-1 odds. Then, the execution. His accomplice gets into that one phone booth and starts faking this long, emotional call about a dying aunt. While that's happening,
300 of Curly's people, all across Ireland, start placing bets on Yellow Sam at the exact same time. The bookies' offices are getting hammered with bets, but they can't call the track to tell them to lower the odds because the line is busy. The odds are locked in, the race starts, and Yellow Sam just blows everyone away. It's flawless.
All right, but here's the thing. Every grand plan, no matter how brilliant, eventually smacks into reality. And for our three system breakers, that moment of impact had three very, very different outcomes. For Ivar Kruger, the end was devastatingly final. The Great Depression hit, and suddenly he couldn't get new loans to pay off his old ones. His entire empire was basically a giant Ponzi scheme, and it all started to collapse. Trapped and facing total ruin and exposure, he took his own life in his Paris apartment, leaving this note. His death set off the Kruger crash, which sent shockwaves through the global financial system. The Hunt brothers' collapse was just as dramatic and way faster. The powers that be finally panicked and decided to change the rules right in the middle of the game. They introduced Silver Rule 7, which basically cut off the Hunt's ability to buy silver with borrowed money. Without that fuel, the price started to tank. And when the price falls, you get margin calls. Your broker demands more cash to cover your losses. Well, on March 27, 1980, a day now called Silver Thursday, they couldn't pay a $100 million bill. And the whole thing just imploded.
And the damage was
And then there's Barney Curley. His day of reckoning? Well, it was payday. His 15,000-pound bet turned into 300,000 pounds. No collapse, no bailout, no tragedy. He just went and collected his money from the very stunned bookmakers. He hadn't broken a single law. He just outsmarted the entire system.
So let's pull it all back together. We've seen the plans. We've seen the fallout. How do we remember these guys? And what does that tell us about our big question? Well, this chart really lays it out, doesn't it? Kruger's whole empire was built on deception, so when it fell, his legacy was sealed. He's remembered as one of the greatest swindlers of all time. The Hunts, they're the gamblers. They made a massive, world-shaking bet and lost spectacularly. But Barney Curley, he didn't lie, and he didn't manipulate the market. He just exploited the existing rules so perfectly that to a lot of people, he became a kind of folk hero, the little guy who outsmarted the big guys.
And this quote about Kruger from the economist John Kenneth Galbraith just says it all. He wasn't just a crook, he was an artist of the con. In fact, his fraud was so massive and so inventive that it directly led to the creation of the U.S. Securities Acts in the 1930s, the laws that form the very foundation of our modern financial regulations.
Which leaves us with one last thought to chew on. All three of these men pushed the boundaries of the systems they were in. Two of them ended up broken because they crossed the line into outright fraud and manipulation. But one of them was celebrated because he played within the rules so brilliantly that he forced the rules themselves to change. So it makes you ask, doesn't it? Where exactly is that line between breaking the rules and completely rewriting them?